a 22-year-old today, Black Indian male with now blonde curly hair and shaved sides, and I'm a trainee at Unlimited with April, who just mentioned in the chat.
My pronouns are she, her, and I'm senior producer.
Yeah, and my pronouns are he, him.
And a trainee. Right, so we're just going to explain a bit about what Unlimited is, first of all, and then we really wanted to use the time to talk about commissioning, which is something we do, but also something we're constantly interrogating. So Marlo, do you want to do the what Unlimited is now bit?
Yeah, well, if I could describe Unlimited, it's a commissioning program that makes sure that gets disabled artists paid and gets, work out, gets work and platforms of work of disabled artists. And that's kind of like our main thing. So that's how we do that is through open call34 wonderful artists and another actual 8 artists with British Council. So we've got lots of artists under our belt, and we're we just commission artists, and we basically do work to make sure disabled artists have a platform and a placeholder in it, not placeholder, but like a place to stand in the industry, and make sure they have a place to stand. I guess that's what,
Yeah, so what we found out was that just commissioning artists alone wasn't quite enough if we didn't also do some work with the sector to make sure that work landed and that those artists were supported. So at the moment we're a programme, we're run by 2 organisations and by myself as a freelancer. So we're run by Shape Arts and Arts Admin. And together and with myself, we deliver this programme. And that's what we've been doing for 7 years. So we started in 2013, although the history of Unlimited is slightly longer because it was part of the Cultural Olympiad, part of London 2012, but as a one-off, but we kind of extended it beyond then. But we're transitioning into an independent organisation, and that transition is already happening. We already have a board in waiting. Delighted to see some of our board members here today. And over the course of this year, we'll slowly start passing things over to that new independent organisation. And then this time next year, we'll be fully independent. And so again, we have to rethink our commissioning model. We will still commission artists. That's the key part of what we do, commission disabled artists. But we need to think about how we do it. So we're going to talk about what we do now, and then hopefully we'll get to have a discussion about what the downsides or what the questions are around commissioning generally, because there are many. So the programme that Marlo spoke about, our open commissioning process. So Marlo, can you remember, this is a quiz now, can you remember approximately how many people applied?
Was it 450 or was it more than that?
It was slightly more, but that's a really good guess. It was 468 people
468
applied. So that's 468 disabled artists applied for funds. If we had funded all of them, that would have been £9 million. So we have to find a way of containing the numbers and the amount of labour that goes into those applications. So the way we do that is to have a really easy first stage, a really easy expression of interest stage that anybody can put in an idea. And that's partly why the numbers are big. Also, the numbers were big this time, obviously because of COVID and the decimation of funding within the sector. So that expression of interest, very, very light touch, lots of ideas. And we have a panel process. So we have 3 different strands: main commissions, research and development awards, and emerging artists awards. And all the applications that we got for those strands went out to the panels who assess for those strands. So what I love to say is that I don't make any decisions. I don't make any commissioning decisions whatsoever, because I think if I did, it would change my relationship with artists who are applying, because they would know that I had a decision-making kind of role. But also, B, why on earth would I be an expert on every single art form and every single stage of an artist's career? I don't think one person can be. So we really try to open that up through panels, and they're often quite large panels. There are at least 20 people per panel. There's at least 50% disabled people within that. There's a lot of independent representation as well as organizational representation within that. We attend to balance within the panels in relation to equal opportunities criteria. So we do as much as we can to make sure that those panels are kind of quite informed. They select down to then a short list. And the short list, this time we shortlisted 77, which was 16% of that original application. That shortlist are all given an hour's worth of support from somebody on the team so that they can put in the best applications they can when it comes to full application stage. And then the panels meet to talk through those applications and make decisions. And this time we awarded, as Marlo said, 34 awards, which is 7% of the people who applied. But Marlo, you actually got to observe a panel this time. So can I ask you what you thought it would be like on one of those days, and then what it actually was like on those days?
Yeah, so it was quite interesting. I thought it would be a little bit more, I was gonna say a bit more, I think it was a lot nicer than I expected. It was very nice and it was like amazing to hear everyone's opinions on the work and how they've talked and discussed the work and the kind of ways they consider everything about the work. So because it was such a tight round, like, you know, there's so many applications and so many strong ones, you know, it was so tight. The way they discussed it, like, you know, we discussed, it was like things about care for the artist, whether they considering paying contributors and stuff, you know, and looking at things that we don't often think about as probably independent artists don't really think about when they apply to things. So it's about trying to support. I would like to say I was in the emerging panel. So that's artists at the beginning of the career or towards the beginning of their career who identify as emerging, who applying for an award from us. So that was quite interesting to see the way we talked about them and seeing like how much we wanted to support them too and how much we wanted to give, like almost it's quite surprising. Like it seemed almost like we wanted to give everyone like some support, or like everyone the thing, and it was quite good but it's quite interesting to see the discussions and what actually makes a piece that a little bit more stronger, a little bit more, you know, what is a piece that has such a strong idea, such a strong kind of hook that, you know, you just want to go straight into it and stuff. It was quite an interesting experience, and I wish I could be in the main R&D panels to see what those conversations were like, you know.
It's one of the things that we try and make sure everybody connected to the program gets some opportunity to sit in some of those processes. A lot of people say that when you're on a panel or when you've got access to a panel, it really helps you work out what you need to say in a funding application. What are the kinds of things that actually a group of people take notice of? Because quite often you're just writing words into a void. I think it's important to know that everybody who is discussed at panel gets full feedback. So we don't do feedback at expression of interest. And that's something we have got flack from in the past. We don't, because we haven't got anything to say. We know why, we know that some people were shortlisted because the panel chose to put them through, but we actually don't know why other people weren't. We did work out that if we paid for independent feedback, it would cost us 2 awards. So we would have 2 less awards in order to be able to pay somebody to give that feedback. And again, there's a real question there about, is that a better use of the money or not? We don't know. At the moment, we're clear that we don't offer feedback at that stage, but we offer very full and frank feedback, either in written or face-to-face, or in some cases both, after the panels themselves. What else to say about the panels? The other thing that's I suppose, unique about the way that we commission is that some of our commissioning is done with partners. Okay, so Marlo, on the spot, we had 11 partners this time round.
Okay.
How many can you remember? And I'll fill in the gaps.
Okay, so we have Polka, Farnham Moultons, Coventry 2021. this is who else do we have? We have Welcome Collection, South Bank Centre, Museum of the Home. Who else do we have? We also have a very new bursary, the David Twill OBE bursary, which was made very recently, and it was quite lucky. We're so happy to have that. Who else do we have?
I think literally the only ones, Stage Gateshead and the Art House.
The Art House, yeah.
So we've got a number of partners where if we think there's a gap, if we think that there's an area of work that we've not invested in before, we haven't had applications coming forward from a particular area, or those applications haven't been awarded, then we look for a partner in that area so that we can work together. So that's partly about obviously increasing the funds that we have to deliver, because we're working usually 50-50 with that partner, some cases more, the partner puts in more. A Bagri Foundation was the other one that we both forgot. So it means that we've got those partners' skills and experience in getting the message out. It means that we can say, this is an area of work where disabled artists could be developing a sustainable practice. Nowadays, an artist has to be able to work in many different areas. You can't just say, my audience is everybody, or I want to make work, entirely on my own terms. Sometimes you need that industry link to really help develop your work. It's a different skill, co-commissioning, compared to just awarding funds. But sometimes the additional benefit of being paired up with an industry partner means that those artists go on with just so many additional skills. So we knew, for example, that we hadn't got a lot of work for children and young people. So Polka Theatre, obviously it's their specialist area. So we're co-commissioning an R&D. If that works and is successful, they will then commission that piece of work. So we're not involved at that point. They're just going on and commissioning it by themselves. That's embedding disabled artists in the cultural sector. It also means that Polka met with, obviously virtually, but met with everybody on the shortlist who was interested in their awards. So they had 4 or 5 conversations with disabled artists they'd not met before. And they will go on to have some form of relationship with Polka. So the partnership model is a really key one for us, because it's about filling gaps. It's about building sustainable relationships, which will help people have sustainable careers. It's about increasing the money that's available for artists. And it's also about broadening that pool of people selecting work, because they're on the selection panel across all of the awards. So we're getting their views on everything, not just work that automatically falls within their kind of area. So the partner awards are really key for us. What else in the standard way that we process? Another downside, I suppose, is that we do it every 2 years. We don't have the money to do it more frequently, or the capacity. And we're a really tiny team, just got bigger by 2 people. First day today, hello to them, they're in the audience. Brilliant, popping on. So that's that capacity thing, and the fact that we can only do it every 2 years is a really annoying thing for some artists who kind of go, when's the next round? And we're going, 18 months. It also takes a really long time. So we put the information out there, usually around July time 1 year. We don't actually award until March the following year, because it takes a really long time to get that news out there. We allow 3 months before that kind of application process closes. And that means if people have particular access requirements, or need us to do translation of materials, or need us to answer particular questions, we can do. Then the expression of interest bit has to all be selected, the shortlist, the full applications, then the decisions. It's a long process. It's a long time to wait for artists. What we also did this time that we've not ever done before is we gave some tiny sums of money to the just missed outs. So artists who stayed in the running until the very, very end, when we were faced with a horrible financial kind of cliff of, do we support this artist or this artist? Those awful decisions you have to make. There were 9 across all of the strands, 9 artists who literally just missed out in those final moments of panel. And this year we'd been given some funds by the Paul Hamlin Foundation to use at our discretion with artists who were in need. And we gave each artist £1,000 if they were going to resubmit an application elsewhere. So anybody on the shortlist will help them resubmit. We'll look through copy, we'll write a letter of support, we'll introduce them to arts officers in Arts Council England or Creative Scotland or Arts Council of Wales. We'll do whatever we can to try and get that work made. But this time, for those just missed out ones, we were able to do just a little bit more as well.
But I think that's also a great thing, about our partners, is having them in our panels, and they actually get an idea of the artist's work and the actual people who are so close that they can actually go and reach out and make those relationships, even if they don't. So even if they don't get the award, they actually still have that relationship there, and that's a great thing. And I think that's really brilliant about our commissioning model and stuff, that we actually can make these relationships that wouldn't happen otherwise.
Yeah, so South Bank Centre has already been in contact with 3 of the artists who didn't make it, going, if you submit an application, you can put us down as a venue for your tour. Or we want to be engaged with you in how you develop this particular installation. And that is gold dust to get through Arts Council's thing. You actually to have those relationships. So absolutely, Marlo, you're really right, that helps. We don't only commission through that model. That's where the bulk of our money goes. So this year it was, Marlo, can you remember how much we spent?
Not about looking it up on the top of my head. I think I'll have to look up the graphics we made, but I'll get back to you on that one.
Well, I know it was over 715,000, but I can't, 715,000, but I can't remember how much over, not much over, but that was where I kept wanting it. So it's a massive sum of money for the cultural sector as a whole. It's still not enough if you look at the people who applied, but it's still, by our standards, it's a really big amount. Did you find it?
Yeah, I'm not very good at reading out money amounts, but I think it's this is 700 and 700 one. I'm really bad at reading out numbers, I will say.
Read out the numbers.
Yes. Just 717,490. Yeah,
so 717,490. There you go. So a pretty chunky amount, when we only thought we'd be able to commission about £500,000 worth. So all of the rest is additional funding that's been brought in either through working with the partners or through getting other arts councils on board. So it's a big kind of mix in that way. But it's not the only way that we commission. We also do some strategic commissioning. So we keep a small amount separate for things that don't fit into that open process, where an opportunity comes up that it's just too good to miss out on, and that actually if we can cobble together some support and the other co-commissioner can cobble together some support. So something like that was, we knew, but again, they still have to meet a gap. So we knew that visual artists, we were supporting more visual art than anything else, but the work wasn't landing in the sector. We had a real barrier, and still do have a barrier, getting into kind of mainstream galleries. But the Blackpool Art B&B got in contact with us, and they actually wanted to take one of our previous commissions and turn it into a room there, and asked us to introduce the artist to them, which we did. So there's a room there that's Christina Vizzi's room. But they said, we love this work so much. Have you got any other artists who could do a room for us? And we said, well, let's ask, let's commission a room together. So we commissioned a room at the Art B&B for an artist called, which eventually, again, it was another open call, but just for that one opportunity. And we've got a room called The Welcome Inn, which is by an artist called Christopher Samuels, which is a deliberately inaccessible room at the Art B&B. And I've stayed in it for 3 nights, and I can absolutely confirm it is the most inaccessible hotel room you will ever have stayed in. You cannot shut the bathroom door. You cannot, the bed is, you have to climb on a stool to get into the bed. The light switch for the bedside lights is on the other side of the room above the door frame. The whole thing is a really brilliant example of bad design, and actually how bad design is the thing that disables people, not their own impairments. So it's all of that. But that was a strategic opportunity. So we look for things that we've never done before that wouldn't fit within our open program, and then that's where the strategic ones come out. And we also do some commissioning with other organizations. So thanks to that Paul Hamlin fund that I mentioned before, we were able to give some money to a University of Atypical in Northern Ireland, who we don't usually get the chance to work there. We were able to give it to them, and then they are able to commission in partnership with us, but they do the work, which is brilliant. And because of COVID, we also did some micro commissioning, which we'd never done before. So we basically looked at any unused budget and redirected it last summer into micro commissions, and we're able to award just over £71,000 awards to disabled artists through that process. Not sure we would do that again, because the work involved was mammoth. It was utterly exhausting. The benefit is huge, but actually, does £1,000 really help? I'm not sure. It's a difficult one. Lots of people want us to redo the micros, and it's a decision we have to make. How do you weight that value of a little bit to a lot of people, or a substantial amount to a smaller group of people, but something that might make a more significant impact on the cultural sector long term? And that's something we really, really struggle with. We've commissioned some micros through working with other organisations. So Dada Fest, we commissioned artists that are based in the northeast of England, and through Coventry 2021 again, obviously artists that are based in Coventry. But I think for us, there's still more that we can do. Marlo, what do you think are the best bits and also the worst bits about how we commission at the moment?
I think the best bit has to be how open it is and how accessible it is. Like, I've experienced it with actually when applying for a job at Unlimited, and that's the thing. We have such an accessible process that isn't there in other places, that makes it actually possible for the people who don't often consider themselves or actually consider to apply for certain things to actually apply, such as giving multiple ways to apply. So artists who may be very visual can actually apply using a video, which one of our artists did, which was amazing. Like, I think, that's a very useful thing. I think that having that open process that's accessible, and that we give so much time to people, and that we actually go, if you get through to our shortlist, we'll give you feedback, we'll give you support, we'll give you all this, when actually you could, like some places, if you were to get, you might not even get feedback even if you got that far. So it's actually quite brilliant, and how much care we put into the process, and how much focus we put on artists, and how much we help, I guess, and support we give. I may say something that was what during our welcome day for our new artists was quite interesting, and that made me consider, is about how do we incorporate rest and that kind of restful practices into our commissioning process, which, And is our commissioning processes, even if it's open, is it still reaching people? Because it relies on marketing, it relies on, people who actually retweeting and spreading the word, or, are people actually hearing it and actually hearing it, or is it the same people who know us hearing it? I will say, so as our recent commissioning round, we wonder if we are getting more people, because we have just commissioned, I think 67% artists, just of the artists we just commissioned, 67% are people we haven't considered commissioned before. So that is quite a large amount, but obviously, and obviously, are we actually reaching those gaps, which we do have a strategic open for, but it's almost like if they don't reach this place, where are they reaching and where are they engaging? It's about looking for those places. And
what was the thing that you picked up on that we didn't? What was the question we didn't ask that we suddenly realized we needed to ask because we'd shot ourselves in the foot?
Yeah, I was doing the one who was collating all the data upon our artists, and I was like, if I was to email an artist, what pronouns would you use? And we didn't ask the pronouns at application stage, which was the issue, because actually during the panels, we weren't sure some people's pronouns and some people's genders, so we weren't able to actually refer to them correctly. And that's obviously, as someone who is transgender myself, to think that maybe if they saw my name and made an assumption, I would feel awful. And I feel like now we've added it to our application processes and our, that to add your pronouns. So it's actually, everyone can see that this is how I wish to be referred to me as this, makes it clear, makes it open, rather than having to research and go into every social media you have to make sure, just to find out and make sure we refer to you correctly, which doesn't always work. So you don't have, especially for commissioning so many artists, you haven't really got time to go and do that for every single artist, for every single time you need to contact someone. So
we had an equal opportunities form which collected data around equal opportunities, but obviously that's separate from somebody's pronoun and something that the whole panel look at. And because we didn't ask about pronouns at all, nobody ever put them anywhere. They weren't in our process, they weren't in the form, and it was something that's a really easy thing to fix, but we hadn't done it. And there's us being a bit cocky, thinking, yeah, we're really quite right on, we've got this nailed down. Rubbish. We haven't at all. And one of the things I really love about Unlimited is that anybody can say anything and anybody can point out stuff. And so the minute Marlo kind of went, hang on a minute, we don't know this, it was just like, oh God, shit. Yeah, it was just a really good learning point for us. The other thing that we do around access is that if you apply to us, you can ask to have your access needs in relation to applying met. So we can pay a support worker to help somebody apply. We can pay communication support to help people understand the questions. So if there's a deaf person who wants somebody to go through the questions with them in BSL, then we can do that. We also have formats ourselves of a lot of the material in BSL or Easy Read or whatever. So we spent, I think, about 17,000 on access for people applying this time round. And we never know how much that budget is going to cost. There's also a bit of fear and trepidation about going, we will meet your access needs to applying, because once you say that, you really feel obviously you have to do that, but how much is it going to cost us? And it can be, we've had as little as kind of 5,000 or 6,000, and we've had up to about 20,000 spent there on previous rounds as well. Anything else we need to say about how we commission at the moment, other than the things that we're thinking about? Or shall we see if there are any questions? I mean, we're questioning ourselves at the moment. The last time my board met, they started that process around how do we begin to evaluate what we do and see what we might do in the future. I went on lots of panels this year. I thought, usually I only say yes to the ones I've got capacity for. This year I thought, sod it, I'll just do as many as I can, because I want to see how other people are commissioning. And I came out of it really pleased with the way we commission, because on some panels I felt I was very definitely told what we should what the panel should respond with, and that felt a bit uncomfortable for me. I really like disagreement. And another panel was very much about consensus, and we all were nudged, our scores were nudged together. We were told if our scores were very different to somebody else's and asked if we would like to refine them or revise them in the light of that, which is horrifying to me because I love disagreement. I love it when you can contain, it's art, we all have different opinions. Yeah, so I've looked at a lot of other processes, and I don't think anybody has come up with the perfectly equitable commissioning process yet, possibly because it doesn't exist. Commissioning is by its nature competitive. That's hard because it means there will be people who get and people who don't get. But yeah, so we're really interested in that nitty gritty, and that's what we'd love to have a bit more of a conversation about. I can see questions coming, which is great. Do you want me to read them out, or are you going to feed them to us, or how do you want to do this?
However you want, Jo. I mean, I think the thinking initially was that we collate them and have a bit of a chat at the end, but if you want to just open up the floor, we can do that now. With that, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got a question here from Sarah Burt. She says, Jo, you mentioned a strength in visual arts and a focus this year on children and young people with polka. Would you say there are other art forms or strategic strengths and weaknesses of the work selected?
Oh, we've not had the let's sit down and look at where the gaps are this year bit yet. So I'm just trying to think if I can hold all 34 in my head and try and work out what those are. Certainly work for galleries still is 2D, or 3D. Traditional artwork for gallery spaces continues to be a bit of a gap for us. We do have some art and technology projects. Quite often we invest in them at R&D, but we don't necessarily invest in them at main. I think there's a bit of a stumbling block at main in terms of, with a process like ours, how do you describe something within limited word counts that can convince at both an aesthetic and a technical level for a panel, not all of whom will have that technical expertise. And I think there's a bit of a fear of investment around some art and tech, particularly when large numbers come into play, and also a fear around the cost of some art and tech projects as well. So art and tech, I would say, is definitely one. We have a very wide diversity of work on the LGBTQIA plus spectrum. It's something that we've really worked at over time. I would say that's probably not a gap anymore. We're awash with it. And ditto work responding to the climate emergency is something that we have quite a lot of representation on. Outdoor work, we've got a bit, but I don't think we've got enough yet, particularly as for the next couple of years, I think we're going to see a really increased demand for outdoor work, oddly.
And I've just seen a question come through from Chelsea, but before we move to that one, off the back of that, Jo, I was wondering if you could talk a bit, given the divergent art forms, how you identify the metrics of selection when you are commissioning.
Yeah, we don't have targets or quotas around particular art forms. And part of that is because over half of the applications to us come in with combined arts or other written by them anyway. I actually think the art form definitions we use are becoming outmoded now. We don't have people who see themselves as single form artists as much as we have people or applications that respond to different sites. So I think, again, it might be something that we do in the future, is to look at, is this a piece of work for traditional stages? Is this a piece of work for outdoor? Is this a multimodal piece of work that's actually going to have many different outputs all linked to a central theme? So we don't ring fence around it. I suppose we do balance, or we retain the right to balance the Commission's portfolio around equality of opportunity, and particularly around geography. This year we didn't need to at all. We absolutely, which was astounding to us. I think the panels are quite aware of that need for balancing. The only people I feel sorry for is that there is a wealth of disabled artists in London. And I think sometimes London does get squeezed slightly. But as I live in the north, don't care about that over much.
Someone's just asked about the split there on that, Jo. Do you have any idea what the split would be?
Yeah, I think this time, I'm making this up, but it's around 27% London. Oh no, Marlo's got it in front of him.
I got it in front of me. Yeah, it's 24% Midlands, and then it's 21% London. So we actually got more Midlands artists this time because of the Coventry. I would say because of Coventry 2021. So that's another way I host where the partnerships and stuff, and followed by Southwest at 18%, and the lowest right currently is Southeast at 6%. So
yeah, Southeast, bit like London. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, that's very rude. They're not at all. It's a very diverse part of the environment. In the past, we've commissioned a lot of work from the Southeast, so I'm less worried about that. We did have a gap within the Southwest and within the Midlands. So our strategic partnership with Coventry, which was around micros and these commissions, and we're doing some strategic commissioning with them as well, was absolutely designed to shift that lack of investment in the Midlands. The Southwest, though, is still an area for us that I think we need to push into a little bit more. We've done quite a lot, but it's still, still a little bit of a balance there. But being able to balance on former years was really important. And I don't think we'd be in the situation now of not needing to, had we not done that previously. So for example, if you look back at the 2014 first range of commissions, the percentage of artists of colour applying was something like 7%. Whereas now we're over 25%. I think we awarded 32% of awards to artists of colour. That wouldn't have happened without some strategic initiative midway through. Because why would a disabled artist of colour trust us? You know, we had to build our reputation, and we had to build trust with that community, which we did through a strategic commission with Marlborough Theatre and Tariq Al-Mutawakil on a piece called Brownton Abbey, which was directly looking at people of colour, queer people, disabled people, and ownership around space. A really, really interesting project. But through doing that and other similar work, it really helped people within those communities trust us as a commissioning body and then apply. And the applications are really strong, which is great.
Great. I don't know if there's another question coming through, if Marlo or Jo, you want to take this. I'm just thinking in terms of artists with learning difficulties, do you work with organisations to ensure these artists are aware of the opportunities? Can they apply on their behalf?
So yes, and we actually had 3 surgery sessions beforehand for artists that we felt might miss out on information. So one was for blind and visually impaired artists, one was for trans and non-binary artists, one was for learning disabled artists, because we felt in all instances there were reasons why people might miss bits of the information. So yes, organisations can apply on behalf of learning disabled artists. There is an issue over pay. There is an issue over that. There's a big sector-wide issue over around the payment of learning disabled artists who often aren't paid for their contribution. projects. If they are, they're often not paid equally for their contribution on projects, and sometimes that's out of their choice because of the benefit system and the fear of losing benefits. Sometimes, shockingly, learning disabled artists pay to be part of projects that are funded arts projects and that then tour. So it's a very strange economy. What we do is insist that learning disabled artists are paid, and we insist they're paid as much as they possibly can be within the bounds of what that artist and that company is agreeing. And in the past, we've awarded work and then we've given them more in order to make that possible. We're trying to be part of shifting practice in that area, but it's a much bigger conversation than just us in the way that the benefits system is structured.
I think also there was a question earlier about whether, talking about artists getting paid, there was a question in the chat about whether we pay our panelists. And I think, yeah, we do, don't we? We pay our panelists. So if you're going to participate in a panel, we do pay. So I think the main thing is we think that we want to pay artists and make sure people are getting paid for contributions. And I think that's one of our main priorities, is making sure payment is there and making sure people are paid to be part of things, and making sure people can actually, because financial barriers are something we, very much don't think British society considers as much. And in the arts, which can be a massive barrier to people. I'm someone who came from a free drama program, and if I wasn't able to access that free drama program, I wouldn't be in the arts now. And not having, that's also because I was in London, because I had the opportunities around me. So it's about making sure those opportunities are there so people can access the arts. And by making sure people are getting paid and getting paid for contributions, I think we're really kind of doing that there, and really supporting.
Yeah, we pay people who we wouldn't pay somebody who was working at Polka to be on a panel if they're representing Polka on a panel, if that makes sense. But any independent person, artist or producer, absolutely are paid for their involvement.
Yeah.
Cool. So Sarah's just said, how do you think the model will change if you become a national portfolio organisation? Would you commission it annually? Because I know you were talking about the 2-year cycle, commissioning cycle there.
The truth is, we don't know yet. It might be that we move to an annual model. It might be that we move to separating partners for every 2 years and then open awards for the interim year. It might be that we do it that way round. It might be that we look at kind of art form or outdoor work as one panel. Sometimes there's, I think, a stress on a panel where everybody, again, it's that thing about how much can you know about. If the panel has 4 theatre performers or theatre practitioners, people who work in that area, and the panel's discussing a piece of visual art, sometimes I worry that specificity, not a word I can say easily, isn't necessarily in play. Sometimes there's real benefits from that, because you get a very different response, which can be a really useful one, but sometimes we don't trigger that really in-depth. We had a circus commission that luckily was funded, but nobody on the panel could speak from a circus background, and that I always worry about. How do you make sure that happens? But we can't curate, or maybe we can we curate a new panel once we know who's applied, or would that be more problematic? At the moment, we can say who the panel is in advance so that people applying know. So we hope to join that process of being an MPO. By the time we've written the application, hopefully we'll know. But it's something that's very much up for discussion at the moment, while we try and work out what the best way is.
Yes, and then Catherine just asked, are the panels funded?
So the panelists are funded, and all elements of that process are funded. It actually costs us a lot less this year because we did them remotely. Usually we buy people very nice food, and everybody comes to London and we cover travel expenses and accommodation and stuff like that. So we didn't have to do that, and that meant we could fund more. We overspent, and some of that overspend is coming from our infrastructure budget that we didn't get to use. But maybe actually artists is a better use of that. Maybe we don't need a very nice salad.
And just whilst we're still on the subject of panels, and what are the sort of internal checks and balances to make sure that the gatekeepers of commissioning are sort of regularly assessed and fairly? I mean, I know, as you said, there's no genuinely equitable, fully equitable selection process, but is there anything that you think is particularly important in your values that you would be able to share?
For us, we commission disabled artists, so having a panel where 50% of the people making those decisions are disabled people, for me, is really essential. It's like, if at the heart of what you do there's one crucial factor, to not have the panel mirror that factor just seems really bizarre. We want to commission intersectional work for intersectional audiences, so to not have an intersectional panel wouldn't work. We have in the past had open recruitment to those panels. This year we didn't reopen that. We used the people who'd been on panels before, and a lot of that was around capacity. I hope we would do that open call process again at some point. And we used to have that you could be on a panel providing you weren't applying to that stream, and we changed that to you couldn't apply at all if you were on the panel, at the request of Arts Council England, who felt that actually if you were anyway involved in that panel process, it could be seen to be a kind of an involved, it could be seen to not be a good idea. You know, maybe you're on a panel and you diss all the visual arts projects because you know yours is coming up on the next panel and is a visual arts project. I think you'd have to be quite Machiavellian to be able to twist it, but it's open to that kind of misuse. Yeah.
So we have a question here. Are you planning to do anything to support disabled artists who are experiencing barriers because of having to continue shielding long term because of permanently diminished immune systems, or those with temporarily diminished immune systems?
So Marlo, how many people on our team? Actually, we don't know at the moment. How many people on our team are in the clinically extremely vulnerable group at the moment?
I'm not sure. Anyone who's got vaccinated, I would say so, but I'm not actually exactly sure because no one's kind of said, but we definitely do have work that has covered those themes, I think, and we have supported, especially in our micros, especially at the beginning and through the pandemic, have supported art that has covered those themes and topics, I would say.
Yeah, we have 2 at the moment. We haven't asked our new starts, but there's definitely 2 of us in that group. I'm one of them, and so it's certainly something that's quite uppermost in my mind, that whole thing about when will it be safe to be out as artists and as audience. So the new work that we're commissioning at the moment, we will ensure that is created in COVID safe conditions, whatever they are for those artists. If an artist is shielding and needs to do that in a different way, then that is something we will absolutely support. And we'll be encouraging all of our artists to think through different ways in which their art can manifest in the world. One of the things that we did with the Paul Hamlyn money when we first got it, and one of the reasons that we got it in the first place, was to help help artists make alternatives that could be streamed, that could come through the computer or through the post or whatever, because it wasn't safe to have live work at that point. And I really hope that that will continue regardless of COVID, simply not just for people who are shielding, but also one of my access requirements is around fatigue and energy. I have loved watching work in the bath. It's been my absolute best thing. Every time I have a bath now, I watch a show. I mean, that just wasn't possible before. And I don't want that to end. For me, that's just like perfect. And I think we really need to encourage people to do that. Obviously, might not work for outdoor work. Don't want to take my bath outside. Don't want that to happen. But I think there's much more we can do with pieces of work to really think through what works for the aesthetics of each piece in terms of that, different ways of disseminating it. The core has to be the artwork. I don't think you can make a blanket, everything's got to be like this, or everything's got to go online. It really does depend on the artwork. Marlo, did you experience cloud spotting at the
Yes,
festival?
so we had cloud spotting we had the industry showing, and that was actually quite interesting. I was spaced out while listening to it, so it's slightly a distant memory, but it was like was interesting hearing the stories of these people who, maybe if it wasn't digital, if it wasn't these spaces were curated in such a way, they would not be able to access these arts opportunities, or even any opportunities. The stories within there was quite shocking to someone who's, who does have tiredness problems, but tends to push through it, and actually makes you consider not just your own, but everyone around you, like, how do we put rest into these? And like, it was very interesting seeing cloud spotting in that. And I think it really does bring up those questions. And so I was thinking about cloud spotting as you were talking. I was going we have commissioned cloud spotting before, which is which was a massive piece, and it was really does examine those themes. There's other works too. I'm trying to think off the top of my head what other works.
So, well, while you're thinking, I'll just explain. So cloud spotting is a piece by Rachel Messinger-Zaif, which looks at rest as an art of resistance. And it was a physical installation with beds in it, where you lay down and listen to an audio piece in an intimate setting with other people who are resting. And it works off an app. So there's a light installation in it. And as you rest, sorry, Raquel, not Rachel. As you so with the people who are connected to this app, as you rest, you make that act of rest visible by lighting up a light. And that light then goes on in that installation. So something that's usually an invisible and often slightly hidden or shameful act of needing to rest becomes part of an installation, part of a beautiful piece of work. And the stories are stories of people resting. And it was made into an audio piece, but again, for intimacy. So there's only a certain number of people allowed in at any one time. And you trigger sounds as you enter, so you're aware of the other people who are resting with you. But it's about making sure that the method it's on at Make, actually. Make have an online version coming up in May. So if anyone's interested, look at their program, you can find it. But it's about matching the online to the aesthetic of the work. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we're approaching the end of the session now. So we've probably only got time for one more session. There's one in the chat from Sarah, but has anyone else got anything burning they want to ask before? Okay, so we'll end on this one then. So you talked a bit about feedback and about reducing the initial application stage, but I wonder if there's anything else you can do to manage the expectations without making the process massively administratively heavy for you.
It's such a hard question, because we really don't want there to be barriers for artists. If you've got a good idea that's viable, then we want to make you to have as much chance as anybody else of making that happen. We don't want it to be about having to have masses of prior experience. If your access to that prior experience has been limited due to the disabling barriers that you've experienced. So everything that we've thought of as a way of kind of streaming and reducing the number of applications comes up as is disabling in itself. It's like, because, you know, oh, well, we'll only look at people who've got this much experience. But what if you've only got the experience you have because of the way that you're perceived in the world, or the barriers that you meet in the world? So we have to keep it open, and we just have to manage that things. I think we'll try and make the expression of interest even lighter. Not quite sure how we can do that, but you know, that might be some questions we don't need. I think we also potentially look at a phone me up and tell me what you want me to put in your application kind of option, because still so many people find just the very act of making an application terrifying and incredibly anxiety inducing. And I think there's more that we can do there, but that's going to give us more, not less.
It's about that balance, isn't it? How do we reach that balance, and how do we but I think by listening to people and what people need is the best way of doing it, and asking, actually maybe sending around like what was good about this, what was bad, maybe sending, you know, but then we don't want to have too much administration then. But again, I think maybe a light level more might actually help us make it more accessible for everyone and make it more, and voices.
We do ask people after they've applied, but what we're not getting is any responses, obviously, from people who haven't applied. How do you find out what turned people off applying? That's another question. Oh God, we've given ourselves more things to do again.
Sorry, sorry, team.
Well, I think that just about brings us to the end of the session, but a huge thank you to both of you. And a special shout out to Marlo, given that it's your birthday. So happy birthday. Woo! But yeah, from both of you, it's just really interesting to hear such a thoughtful and thorough personal testimony about how to approach balancing inclusivity with discernment and applications, and such a vast field of work. But yeah, fascinating. Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming. Check out our Culture Sessions website for the next session in May, which is May 17th. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.